Well, if the officer has reasonable grounds to suspect that that young person has an article on them that can endanger themselves or other people or even the officer themselves, and they believe that a strip search is the only way to carry that out. But unless it's a critical nature, that should be done with an appropriate adult. And a lot of these stops and searches of strip search of intimate nature just does not add up, that it has to be done outside the presence and hearing of an appropriate adult.
Any sense, does it? This is why I want to understand the circumstances under which this would happen. So I guess you're saying that if a police officer arrest, would you have to be arrested before this? You can do this?
No. If the officer has reasonable grounds to suspect that person is associated with a crime that's been alleged, they've seen CCTV, there's been information or direct evidence that the officer can account to, and that's given him or her reasonable grounds, then the officer can do that direct search. Invariably, when it comes to young people, it should be done at the presence and hearing of the public, and more appropriately, it should be done at the station where they can call in an appropriate adult for that search to be carried out. So that's what has to be done according to the codes of conduct. But this is not being adhered to. And it begs some really strong questions on why these officers are allowed to do this. Is it the cavalier culture of the Met that think they can just get away with this without there being any implications? Is the supervisors, the sergeants, inspectors doing their job, holding their officers to account with strong ethical leadership and accountability? These are sort of things that have been asked for decades, and it doesn't seem to be making any difference. And all the time, the Met comes up with, well, we're changing and we're learning. But it seems to be regurgitating the same thing over and over again.
This idea of a strip search, it's a very provocative term, isn't it? Can it just mean as simple as ask a 16-year-old to take off their jacket and their hoodie, let's say? Or does that literally mean down to your underwear?
Yeah, strip search is more than just their outer clothing, the jacket or other sort of clothing
sweatshirts,
on
hoodies,
top of
tops,
them.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's more than just their outer clothing, let's say. It's when it's going down to their underwear, and the intimate search is when they're asked to remove their underwear and an internal look at any orifice they believe something can be hidden. So it's a very, very traumatic experience, especially for a young person. It'd be a terrible circumstance where an appropriate adult is not there. And that's what we learned from Child Q and what happened with her when officers, on just a suggestion that she smelt of cannabis, went down to an intimate search. And that had massive impact on her family, and the wider community.